Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm Jon Favreau.
I'm Jon Lovett.
I'm Tommy Vietor.
On the pod today, we have a very special guest, the one and only Katie Couric. We're going to do a little special episode today where we go through the news and all the craziness of the day of the last week with Katie.
That wasn't even the plan, guys, but it was such a good conversation that's what just happened.
It's just what happened. We talked about everything. We're going to do a few more housekeeping things before we get to the interview with Katie.
But don't fast forward.
Because
we'll make it fun. We'll make it fun.
Tommy?
Yes.
What do we have on Pod Save the World this week?
This week on Pod Save the World, it's the Scare the Hell Out of You episode with Obama's former Homeland Security Advisor and Chief Counterterrorism Advisor to the President, Lisa Monaco, who is a very interesting person. She comes from DOJ and was in the National Security Division over there and just left the White House, so tune in.
Do you have a little bit of a cold?
I do. I don't feel very well.
But I think you sound okay.
Thank you.
That's great. Also,
making radio magic.
Tomorrow night, Tuesday night, we are going to go live on Facebook Live with our friends at Funny or Die, and we're going to do a little live show.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about stuff. So anything that happens while this pod's going on, breaking news, we'll be able to talk about it tomorrow night.
Will we get paid for that? Would there be a way for that money to get transferred to us if we were to demand payment for?
No, I mean, I think we should pay Lovett for his time because his time is valuable.
But it's so hard. It's so hard to pay
his time
people.
is money.
And
it's so hard
to
to pay
do that, we should use Square Cash.
Oh, cool.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah. Square Cash is the newest, simplest way to pay people back. Friends, family, coworkers, anyone. Sending and receiving money is totally free and fast, and most payments can be deposited directly to your bank account in just a few seconds, because time is money. In the Cash App, link your debit
That
or
was my joke. Guys, I want you to know
that was Lovett's joke.
We re-recorded this because I interrupted too much, and then he stole the jokes. And
now we're going to have to re-record again.
No, we're not. We're not. This is good.
We're keeping this. It's great. It's gold. It's so valuable, I'm going to pay for it with the Cash App. In the Cash App, link your debit or credit card, select an amount to send, and type in a friend's phone number or email address to complete a payment. They'll get a notification they've just received the money. We use it all the time here at Crooked Media, so download the free Square Cash app for iOS or Android today. One more thing before we go. We asked everyone to go and sign up for Resistance Recess in some town halls, and you guys were amazing. We have 1,332 RSVPs came through resistancerecess.com/crooked just through Crooked Media stuff.
Yeah.
And then Move On has a whole bunch of people, and
Indivisible.
AFL-CIO and Indivisible and all these other groups. So thousands and thousands and thousands of people are signing up. It's unbelievable. We've had some great town halls over the weekend. There's more happening today. They're just getting started. Over 300 events have been posted just for the Crooked Media crew. And the New York Times had mentioned this on the front page on Friday about what Resistance Recess and what's going on.
But they didn't mention us.
They did not mention us. They mentioned Resistance Recess. It's okay.
Anyway,
go to resistancerecess.com/crooked. Sign up to go to your members' town hall or to hold your own.
Yeah, it is working, by the way.
It is working.
Watch these videos. These members are scared to death of their constituents.
Yeah,
show up, be respectful, ask questions. It's working.
And Paul Ryan has introduced a plan where he's just, basically the replacement plan for Obamacare is take a bunch of healthcare and money away from poor people and give it to rich people.
It's a picture of a hospital.
Astounding.
And they'll mail it to you. That's the plan.
That's the plan. So let's fight this week and hopefully we can make a difference. We have a very special guest, Yahoo's global anchor, Katie Couric. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. And Jon Favreau, Tommy Vietor, and Jon Lovett. And Dan Pfeiffer's here, isn't he?
No, Dan's not here.
We left him behind.
Sorry. Let me do that again. Okay.
I think we should leave this in.
Where the hell is Dan?
Who cares? Dan, I love you. Just kidding.
So, hi, fellas. Nice to be here. I'm excited to be on your show. I know it's doing really well, so mazel, mazel, good things on that. And lots to talk about. So you guys want to go first?
Sure. So we'll start with Trump's burgeoning relationship with the news media. Last week, the big news was Trump tweeting, the fake news media is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people. So my question to you is, how dangerous do you think it is for Trump to cast the media as the enemy of the American people? Or do you think it's dangerous?
I thought you were going to say, how dangerous are you, Katie Couric?
Okay, that's the first question. Yeah.
My nickname is Katie Danger. No, I think it is incredibly dangerous. I think we've seen him go down this road, but I think it was brought to a new level with that recent tweet. It's gotten sort of progressively worse in terms of his relationship with the press. Clearly, he's trying to delegitimize the press, just as he's trying to delegitimize the judiciary and the entire electoral process, these democratic institutions, because it gives him more credibility. It makes it harder for people to take criticism of his policies or what he's doing seriously, or at least a certain portion of the population. So I find it really depressing, dispiriting, and I think the press is still trying to figure out, the media writ large, how to handle. And when you talk about the media writ large, of course, you're talking about very bifurcated media organizations, because you have the conservative press on one side and a more progressive press. And, I think there are fewer and fewer that can be considered sort of straddling both worlds. So I think people are scratching their heads saying, how do we deal with this as news organizations? How do we regain the trust, if you will? Because one thing he said that was accurate in his press conference is the approval rating for the media is lower than the approval rating for Congress. And I think, how do you handle a problem like Donald Trump, to quote the Sound of Music, instead of Maria von Trapp or whatever. So I don't know what the solution is. I think that the media has to resist getting sucked into these personal battles, and has to try as much as it can to really focus on the policy positions he's taken and some of the things that he needs to be held accountable for, the relationship with Russia and what that means, and get to the bottom of that. I don't think investigative reporting has ever been so important as it is now. And I think that they need to spend less time focused on his tweets and his style, and more time focused on the substance of his policies. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, I think you see this sort of challenge, which is when Trump says something like, the media is the enemy. I mean, there's nothing that a lot of the press corps likes to do more than kind of navel gaze and discuss their own relevance and role.
Right.
But yet, at the same time, it is important to figure out what you do and how you cover a president who says these things about the press. So I guess the question would be, how do you respond and hold the line against a president who declares the media the enemy, while at the same time not letting it distract from the importance of that kind of investigative role, policy role, substantive role?
Well, I think, and I also, I was thinking it's a great time to do a documentary on the role of the media in a democracy, and go to a country where there isn't a free press and what that's like, and remind people of some of the basic principles that this country was founded on. I think that's really important. I think, to your point, too much navel gazing starts to feel like too much navel gazing. So how do you also deal with all this fake news? During the campaign, I had very well-educated friends sending me articles saying, did you see this? And I would be like, where did you see that? This is complete bullshit. And my friends would be like, oh, it's all over the internet. Right. So I think that the technology has moved faster than sort of our ability to consume it with some kind of discernment. And I think, maybe news organizations need to get together so that consumers can know what a legitimate news organization is that adheres to certain principles and practices, almost like a good housekeeping seal of approval. So when they read something, they can appreciate and understand that this has been, double sourced, that it's been edited. Now, of course, the problem is fewer and fewer outlets do that now, because of the demand for speed is superseded the demand for accuracy. So, I think there are all sorts of issues entailed in this conversation.
Yeah, and another complicating factor is the blurring line between fake news and partisan media, because you have, the former CEO of Breitbart sitting in the most powerful office in the White House right now, and they're sort of his hand-picked go-to news outlet who, they had the only seat reserved in the front row at the first press conference. So I'm wondering, how can a press corps work with a White House when they're going to their favorite news sources and there's this clear partisan slant of the press corps that's growing? It's not getting more objective. I think it's getting actively less objective through these Skype interviews and the other things they're doing.
No, I agree. And I think that the media just has to continue to stay on top of these stories. I think part of the problem is that there was always this fine line between access and accountability. You do a tough interview with a political leader, a president, a cabinet member, and this happened to me in my career, and then you get blackballed by that White House because they don't like the hard questions you ask. They didn't like your quote-unquote tone. And that happened to me several times in the past. And I think these networks still, it's this kind of struggle because they want the ratings that would come with an interview with a high-ranking official or even the president. But the minute that you really come down on that president, which is hard to imagine not doing in the current administration, you will never have access again. So I think people need to realize these news outlets that they're probably going to have to give up access because already I think the administration recognizes publications and networks and whatever who are going to be predisposed to be easier on administration officials.
Right. I mean, I'm wondering what you think of, there's this half hour in the morning, network news show that is hard news. And I feel like at certain points of time that half hour has been longer. It's been 45 minutes or an hour. If you watch CBS this morning, it's a little longer. I'm wondering what your take is on sort of watching that block shrink over time or the sort of sensational or commercialization of tabloidization of some of these morning news programs.
Look at Tommy asking, it's interesting.
Well, I think about that a lot. I think about that a lot because it has shrunk significantly. And I think, the time that is allotted to really serious, important issues has gotten less and less. I think part of it is, with a shrinking audience, you need to appeal to a mass audience. So there's fear, I think, that you're going to turn people off by doing too much hard news. I think Good Morning America started sort of being lighter, and then I think the Today Show sort of followed suit. I think the Today Show has self-corrected to a certain degree. But, it's tricky, isn't it? Because it's sort of some of the same things that these companies are dealing with, whether it's Under Armour, LL Bean, or Nordstrom's. Once you get politicized at all, you turn off a big segment of the population, right? And it's tricky, I think. But if I were, in charge, I would certainly devote more time to big issues. And they don't, it doesn't have to all be politics, it could be explaining NAFTA and talking about the controversy of the wall. I went to a dinner this weekend, and the Mexican ambassador to the UN was kind of talking to us about the wall and how humiliating that was for Mexicans, and about the fact that many fewer Mexicans are coming to the United States because of NAFTA, because it has been so important to the Mexican economy that many people are staying in Mexico where they can find good jobs. Things like that, I think that we get so sort of caught up in the superficialities of who did what, who said what, the outrageous behavior, the crazy tweet, that we don't really dig into these issues that I think educate and help illuminate some of the big policy challenges that we're facing in this country. Whether or not they would, abandon a morning show in droves if that kind of thing happened, I'm not sure. But I would like to see much more of it, frankly.
Do you have a question for us?
Yeah, sorry.
We just took like the first five.
Well, gosh, I have so many questions for you guys. First of all, I know that part of your mission in doing Pod Save America and Crooked Media is to encourage activism. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, I read a piece in the Times this weekend that said, as liberals and progressives become more politically active and kind of stand up against some of the policies that are being enacted by this administration, moderate Republicans are being pushed closer to Trump because, again, this divide is so intense and the rhetoric is so harsh on both sides. And I'm curious, do you think we're forever going to be a polarized nation, a polarized media? Is there any way to cross this divide at all? Jon, I'll ask you first, and I'd love for the other guys to weigh in.
Yeah, we were just talking about that article. We're not fans.
I'm being very restrained, but I hate that article with the fire of 1,000 suns.
Really? Okay, good. Tell me why.
And not because the question you're asking isn't important, right? Like, I think the question about this polarization is really important, but that article was a bunch of garbage because it conflates a bunch of different things. Like, is activism, protest, and Hollywood liberals, are they alienating Trump voters? By the way, first of all, I can't. The article was so outrageous because it asked these Trump people, like, you know what? I used to like Meryl Streep, and now I don't even know if I can go to the movies. Shut up. Give me a break. and then also this guy being like, I might have supported a Democrat, but then I saw a mean tweet about Donald Trump, and now I don't know what to think anymore. I think there's a lot. I think that sometimes you see these that first of all, I think that there are people who answer these questions in a way that they think pundits want them to answer them, and they're not speaking to their actual feelings about like what the actual way in which they make decisions about politics are. They're asked a question, are liberals alienating you? And then the answer is very easy to say yes. I don't know. I'm rambling. That article pissed me off.
What about the Pew poll that showed 70% of moderate Republicans think Donald Trump is doing a good job? Were you surprised by that?
Well, so I wasn't because since they may call themselves moderate Republicans, but they ID as Republicans, and so if your party ID carries more of a weight than whether you identify as moderate, liberal, or conservative, right? So in that same poll, independents gave him a 35% approval rating and a 59% disapproval rating, right? So they shaded it to fit the narrative of the story. The other thing is, the three people that they interviewed for that story, one of them had been in the New York Times before, interviewed by the same reporter wearing a Make America Great Again hat. And then one of them said that, said that she was more scared of Democrats than Islamic terrorists. So these are not like persuadable Republicans, right?
Look, she has a point.
No, but to your larger point, the question about polarization is a good one and a right one. I think what that article does is it sort of conflates this is what a lot of analysis has been doing these days, Trump fans with Trump voters. And I think those two groups are different, right? The Trump fans, which I think they interviewed a few Trump fans in that piece and not just Trump voters, reluctant Trump voters, they are getting their news from Fox and Breitbart and all these very conservative media sources and sometimes fake news sources and trying to pierce their bubble, right? And try to persuade them why Trump isn't good for the country or Trump is lying or Trump is doing X. I think that is extraordinarily difficult and that is a huge problem that we have to deal with. And I'm not sure how we deal with that because it's hard to reach people like that who are getting all this news like that. But,
well, is that what what is crooked media? What is your goal? Is it sort of a Fox News on the left?
It's not. I mean, it's weird because I don't want to say that it's Fox News on the left, but I think it is we want to be a progressive media company that sort of inspires activism, right? And so I think that there's a younger generation out there right now, and there is a gap between their enthusiasm and their engagement. So you have a lot of young people who are really excited. They want to do something, they want to get involved, but they don't know how, and they haven't been involved in politics before. And we want to sort of bring those people.
Tell them to vote.
That's the start. That's the start.
And one big difference too is that I think we're trying our best to kind of have an honest conversation. And look, we have a very strong point of view. We obviously we are Democrats, but we're trying to do our best to say what we think, how we feel, being honest about that. And I don't think that's true of Fox.
Just getting back to your initial question, I mean, I think there's certainly the case during the election that there was a lot of people, this show included, where the tone was Donald Trump is an idiot. If you vote for Donald Trump, you're an idiot. Yeah. And that came through loud and clear to a lot of people. We've done a lot of soul searching on that, and I think that was unhelpful to say the least. I think it's your God-given right as an American citizen to say whatever the hell you want about any elected official in the language that you feel is most appropriate. That said, I don't think we're going to persuade people unless we're being a little more thoughtful about how we talk about him sometimes.
I think this is true for liberals, and I think it's true for politicians too. It's never a good idea to play sociologist when you're talking about voters, right? Because when you talk about people feeling this divide or feeling that they're put upon by Clinton supporters or the elites or stuff like that, it's people. We often talk about people like they're this we're anthropologists studying an ancient culture. We're what do the white working class voters think?
Like
Where
Sir
do they
Richard
go
Attenborough with a pair of binoculars. binoculars.
And like, look, and politicians have done that for, like, Obama has done that a few times when he did the guns and religions comment. Like, Hillary Clinton did that with deplorables. Like, it is never a good idea to talk about voters, right?
Well,
Richard
isn't that
Attenborough.
part of the problem, you guys? I interviewed Doris Kearns Goodwin after the election and on this podcast, and she basically said it, and I think Brian Stevenson talks about this a lot as well, being proximate. And part of it is geographical. I mean, that we have these rural and exurban voters oftentimes. And people in these big cities, coastal cities, have very little interaction with people. I was having dinner with my husband on Friday night, and we were sitting next to a very nice couple from Memphis. And they recognized me despite the fact I had no makeup on and I looked really scary. And so we started chatting. And this guy, we were talking about Trump, of course, because you can't go anywhere without, there's no place that is safe. There's no Trump-free zone these days. And he basically said, I voted for Trump, and I was screaming at him on the television saying, please shut up. And I said, but do you still support him? He said, yeah. He said, I have a family furniture business. The Asians are killing American manufacturing when it comes to furniture. The time it takes to build a new factory in this country is crazy. There are too many regulations. We want the best for our employees. And we really hope that he's going to be more hospitable to small businesses. And, my husband, who's in finance, basically says, Donald Trump could do a lot that's good for the economy. Would you concede that there are some positive things that he could do and maybe some corrections from overregulation that might have been put in place during the Obama administration?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of positive things he could do. I mean, look, what's interesting about that conversation with the guy is that I think where we should be opposing Donald Trump or debating Donald Trump is on those issues, right? Because I could make a case that Obama's policies or liberal Democratic policies would do a better job of helping small businesses and bringing manufacturing back or educating people for the next generation of high-tech manufacturing, right? And so I think getting back to those, I think those arguments are probably the best way to actually persuade people and not, oh my God, did you see his tweet? He's awful and terrible and that's it. Because I think the bigger gap and the bigger bubble here is between people who are super engaged with the media and consume media every day, every minute of the day, and that goes for people on the left and people on the right, and then many, many more Americans who are just very casual observers of the media and casual consumers of the media, and they are not paying as close attention to a lot of these debates as we are, and therefore when they aren't as outraged about everything as Donald Trump does as we are, we're often like, well, aren't you paying attention? And it's like, well, no, people are busy, they're leading busy lives, and they don't want to spend every 5 seconds trying to correct Donald Trump's lies.
And aren't a lot of these arguments or discussions very nuanced and complicated? Not everybody is reading The Economist, where the whole issue was on globalization or automation. And, I think one of the problems, and you all can certainly respond to this, is I think President Obama had a hard time communicating in simple terms what his policies would do. And you've heard this before. He was often sort of professorial and almost too sophisticated in the way he expressed himself. And I think, of course, you have the polar opposite in Donald Trump, in terms of how simplistic he is in explaining his positions. So how do you get even those two arguments out there and discussed in an intelligent way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two pieces to that. There's communicating the policies, and then there's whether or not these policies, this consensus around economic policy has been accepted. Because what's interesting about what you're saying about this person you met at the restaurant is actually, Tommy and John would roll their eyes, but it's actually similar to the kind of thing my dad says, who had a factory, and no, see,
I didn't roll your eyes at your dad.
I'm more mad that you accused me of rolling my eyes.
That I say this
the
a
eyes
lot.
have been sitting right here looking straight ahead.
Katie, I want you to know they've been great, and I was wrong. Okay? But what I was going to say is that, I feel like there's been this, especially, Trump's actually adopted some of this Paul Ryan language around taxes and regulation. And there has been a really big divisive debate in Washington for a long time on taxes and regulation. But what Trump came in on was actually kind of breaking up a consensus around things like immigration and trade that it turns out were incredibly resonant issues with people. And I think if there's one good thing that's coming out of what Trump is doing is, first of all, I think he's turning over a bunch of dogmas on the right, but also I think he's forcing Democrats to confront a lot of these policies, which I think Barack Obama, Democrats generally have talked a lot about a communications failure, and I think that's true. But I think what the Bernie Sanders rise, what Trump's rise is showing is there's actually bigger policy questions that we maybe need to answer in a different way.
This is Pod Save America. Stick around. There's more great show coming your way.
You know what? Let's say you're a national security advisor fired faster than any other senior official in the history of the administration. You got some time in your hands and you're thinking, you know what? I don't have time to go to the store because I'm weeping in my bed, but I can cook for myself. I'm Mike Flynn, and I'm using Blue Apron.
Blue Apron is the #1 fresh ingredient and recipe delivery service in the nation. Their mission is to make incredible home cooking accessible to everyone. Even you love it, even you. Blue Apron achieves this by supporting a more sustainable food system, setting the highest standards for ingredients, and building a community of home chefs. Check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/crooked. That's blueapron.com/crooked. You'll love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home cooked meals with Blue Apron, so don't wait.
Hannah's making one tonight, but I'm not home because I don't live there anymore. That's the honest answer.
And on a sad note.
What are the Democrats going to do to get their mojo back, guys?
I mean, I think it's going to start. I think it has to start from the grassroots. I think it's starting in a lot of these protests. I think it's starting with a lot of these town halls. Like, I do not think it starts in Washington with a lot of the leaders we have there. I think already a lot of the Democrats in Washington are playing catch up to what's going on around the country. I think that's a good thing because I think if we're going to reinvent the party, reinventing it from outside of Washington is better than doing it from inside Washington.
And also, that's actually, I think, ultimately what bothered me about that article you referenced to bring it back, which is, look, Hollywood people sounding off about love Trump's hate, like, I think that can be useless. But to conflate that with an incredibly exciting and inspiring moment of activism and protest and people going town halls, I think that's wrong, and I think that's too broad a brush, not a precise enough tool, because I think that this activism, whether or not there are some protesters who go too far and say things that maybe bother some people, on the whole has been one of the only things that has successfully taken the microphone away from Donald Trump.
It is funny. You have, like, on the national level, you have Democrats with like simplistic slogans like "Love Trump's hate," and then at these town halls, you have average voters with an incredibly sophisticated understanding of the Affordable Care Act, asking their congressmen questions about lifetime limits and caps and stuff like that. And it's really inspiring to see that. And it's also a lesson that, people know a lot more than just the people are more than the simplistic slogans.
Well, isn't that I remember watching those town halls after that summer when President Obama first introduced the Affordable Care Act. And, I think it was a very organized effort to protest this program. Remember? And people would be like, on page 38, paragraph 2, you state. So I think that our people at those town halls following that model that we saw early on in the Obama presidency, you think?
So far, yeah. I mean, so far it looks like there's a very active, very well organized, very well educated, respectful campaign to go to these town halls, to demand that members of Congress hold them, and to ask them very specific questions, both about the Affordable Care Act, but also sort of the Russia scandal and other things going on. So it seems like that playbook is being followed, although I do think these town halls have gotten shy of being quite as intense or caustic as maybe the Tea Party ones were back in the day, but that was because those people legitimately thought that there were going to be death panels and things that were lies.
Yeah, but they're
I remember watching those and thinking how woefully uneducated the members of Congress were.
Oh, God, yeah.
When they faced their constituents. It was shocking to me. Shocking. Was it to you?
No. Look, I used to say, approval rating of Congress amongst the American people is somewhere around 10%. Approval rating of Congress among people who have worked at Congress is about 0%. We know these people, and it's the worst the closer you get.
Some of them are great.
Oh, that's lovely. That's so depressing. But okay. So we have the educated people at town hall meetings. You have people protesting. So what is this realistically going to accomplish? I read David Brooks a couple of days ago, and he said basically there's nothing that really can be done for the next 4 years. I mean, what do you think? What is the road forward in your view for people who oppose Donald Trump? The midterms don't look super promising.
No, see, I think that the midterms do. I think there's Democrats need 24 seats to take the House back. I think there were something like 30 seats where Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump in a district where a Republican is sitting in the district right now. So I think that's the first target. And
the Senate looks pretty dubious.
Senate's tough.
Senate's tough. I don't think we can win the Senate back because I think you can pick off. At best, you could pick off Dean Heller in Nevada and Jeff Flake in Arizona at best, and then you're still you're basically got a tied Senate at that point.
And we have a lot of Democrats to defend,
too. The best case scenario is a tied Senate, and then the Democrats taking the House back. But if the Democrats take the House back, then they have subpoena power, then they can investigate, then they can legislatively stop a lot of Donald Trump's domestic policies, so it would be huge.
And when I say hold Trump accountable, I mean impeachment, but I don't say it.
Well, let's go there.
I mean, I think you could. I don't think it's a good idea to throw around the word impeachment unless there's an impeachable offense that you're
are. We should impeach him.
Are there?
I don't know that we know yet, but I do think no one should discount how unbelievably distracting these ongoing investigations are going to be. I mean, depending on who you read, there are multiple FBI investigations going on a variety of Trump associates or aides or what have you, and this White House is going to be more bogged down than they could ever possibly imagine, and it's just begun,
and possibly for good reason. I mean, it might not just be a distraction,
right?
Very seemingly for good reason.
In all seriousness, I think holding them accountable means investigating, means actual hearings, means doing the job that people like Jason Chaffetz and Paul Ryan refuse to do. Whether or not there's grounds for removing Donald Trump, I don't think we can say yet.
But you have a lot of people who aren't refusing to do it, right? Mark Warner, people like that who are coming forward and saying, John McCain saying, others claiming there should be an independent bipartisan committee or even an outside committee, right?
Yeah,
right.
I mean, look, the fact that James Comey met with the Intel Committee chaired by Richard Burr, Republican, and Mark Warner, and all of those members went into that. They canceled their recess plans for a little while.
And these people love their vacation.
And they love their vacation. and they took that meeting with Comey and they walked out of that meeting. They didn't say a word, except Marco Rubio, who tweeted, "I'm now more confident than ever that we're going to investigate this."
Marco Rubio, not a fan of courage, usually. So that's actually something. I mean, he's voting with Trump 100% of the time, but yeah, once in a while he tweets okay.
Yeah, and the Intel committees have now told the administration to preserve all records to Russia. I mean, that's a serious, for a bipartisan committee there, that's a serious step.
Well, what do you think the Democrats should do in Congress, the people you hold in such high regard? Should they do what to Trump what the GOP did to Barack Obama?
I mean, I think they should oppose every policy they disagree with, which seems to be many. I mean, I don't think he has put if the Paul Ryan repeal and replace plan, which basically just takes Medicaid and healthcare subsidies away from millions of people, is the plan, then absolutely they should oppose it. I think that every time a plan comes up or a proposal or a policy comes up, Democrats should decide, would you support it on the merits, right? And it doesn't seem.
Should they pick their battles? In other words, I mean, should they put up a fight against Neil Gorsuch? Because if they really do that, it's going to pretty much hand Donald Trump a big fat victory, is it not?
I think he's going to get Gorsuch on regardless.
Yeah,
because he's got the votes. But I do think, I think hearings are important for Gorsuch, which is what Merrick Garland didn't get. And I think let's hear him out. Let's ask him really tough questions. And if it seems like he's a judge that's not in the mainstream, which we believe Merrick Garland was, then vote against him.
Also,
and if you do think he's in the mainstream, then vote for him.
In the mainstream. I mean, that's whether or not Democrats should vote to confirm him it will really ultimately have nothing to do with whether or not he's in the mainstream. They've already made up their minds, and it's totally a political decision. The thing I would say about that political decision that's important to me is we need to give people a reason to vote for Democrats. And there's a lot of people out there that want to see that Democrats are fighting. And the fact that Gorsuch will get on no matter what is almost beside the point. Showing that we're willing to fight is going to get people excited about sending more Democrats to the House and to the Senate.
Let's talk about Hillary Clinton, if we could. John, I'm just curious. I heard so many people say if the Hillary we saw in the concession speech would have surfaced more during the course of the campaign, it might have turned out differently. Does that gall you when people make that observation?
What do you think, Lovett?
I think
Since
people
you
have been
wrote for her.
saying that if only the Hillary that showed up after she lost were around, she would have won. They said that after her 2008 defeat. I think they said that again this time. I think that there is some truth to it. I think that there's some truth to the fact that there's some kind of a political instinct that she has and that the people around her have over the years that has nothing to do with an individual team, because it repeats over and over again, that there's a kind of control that ultimately is self-defeating. And I think that's absolutely true.
But look, this is
So
not,
is that what happened? Do you think that's what went wrong? She was too cautious and controlling?
I think that's
Or the campaign itself, that sort of that sounded over personalized, but that the sort of ethos of the campaign was too cautious and controlling.
Look, you mentioned that about the concession speech. People have said that about John Kerry after his concession speech. They said it about Mitt Romney after his concession speech. They said it about Al Gore after his concession speech. Like,
They said it about John McCain.
They said about John McCain. There are a certain brand of politicians who are too cautious during a campaign, and it is not in their and are less cautious after the campaign's over. And that is because they run with an overwhelming fear of losing, and that fear of losing makes them more cautious and calculated sometimes.
That's true.
When that's
You know,
not who they are.
my sister was running for lieutenant governor of Virginia with Mark Warner when she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and she was a real rising star in the Democratic Party, and a lot of people said she was going to be the first female governor, and unfortunately, tragically, she passed away. But she told me when she was running, for as this first state senate, et cetera, she said, when you run for office, you have to be willing to lose.
Yeah.
And I think what she meant is, it sounds so simple, is that you have to be true to yourself and to your core values and principles and let the chips fall where they may.
It's absolutely right. It does sound simple, but it is incredibly hard, and a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just this people. It's like there's so many advisors and there's so many polls, and but ultimately people don't make a decision based on like how you met 10 different metrics. You have to get them to vote for you. You as a person have to get someone else to vote for you. And look, I think ultimately it's actually probably not that helpful to worry about what Hillary Clinton's individual liabilities were when we need to figure out who the next person is and how they're going to win. And the truth is, everything mattered in this campaign. We lost by 100,000 votes across 3 states. Comey mattered, the email mattered, the hacks mattered, the leaks everything mattered. What
about a coherent message to blue-collar Democrats? I know that you all have you all have said that there was that message, but somehow it just didn't come through. And saying go to my website just doesn't cut it, fellas.
We agree.
I think that's fair, and I do think that it's worth examining this campaign because I don't want us to overlearn problems that may or may not have been specific to Hillary Clinton and her campaign and apply them too broadly to Democrats and overthink sort of needing to segment the population of the United States and reach out to X, Y, or Z voter. That said, I think the bigger problem we all made was the lesson of Bernie Sanders and of Donald Trump was that every voters across the country were screaming, we are sick and tired of Washington. And then we handed them someone that they've been seeing in Washington for 30 years as a nominee. And that was just summarily rejected on a million questions that are probably values-based, more so
Do you
than they
think
were
Bernie
policy-based.
Sanders would have beaten Donald Trump?
We talk about this a lot.
It's the look.
Listen
yes.
to these dodges, artful
No,
dodges.
I'll say
Good one.
yes.
Nailed it.
yes.
My position is yes. My position is
But
Bernie would
it's
have won.
I say yes, but I hate counterfactuals because it's so like evidence free for saying that.
Right.
But
Right.
I have this feeling now that he would have.
Yeah, and look, we've talked about this before. And this actually goes back again to that article. Like, liberals aren't helping Trump, but liberals do need to think very carefully about the language we use and the way we talk to people that are really suffering. And I think that was a failure, not of the Hillary Clinton campaign, but of Democratic politics generally.
But I think you risk it at perpetuating that, because I think there's something patronizing and dismissive about some of the approaches that are being taken by progressives in fighting Donald Trump that you have to be aware of and just in some ways stay away from, where it's almost class warfare, I think, that we're seeing. Do you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we sell patronizing and dismissive by the pound here on Pod Save America.
It's part of our brand.
No, you're
Proudly, apparently.
Look, you're absolutely right. I mean, a good message is inclusive and disciplined and proactive and positive and focused on the future. And it's a lot easier and more fun to criticize the dust-up of the day.
Also, we've noticed like small things. We've talked about this where Democrats often say, the working class feels left behind by the last 20 years of inequality and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, they don't feel left behind. They have been left behind.
Right.
But it's like, it's little comments like that are more, like I said, it's analyzing people as opposed to advocating for people.
Sort of that anthropological approach you referred to
and
earlier.
I think one thing Bernie Sanders does really well is he advocates for people in a real simple way, and it's not quite it's ideology aside here, right?
Yeah.
It is speaking to people's real frustrations and anxieties.
And it's also, by the way, it's not being too smart for our own good. Complicated policies that we're trying to sell. People want good healthcare. They want they want simple, elegant solutions to problems that they can understand. And I think a lot of sort of Democratic insidery, the conversation got very complicated. It got very much like a
Policy paper?
Yes.
Like a white paper?
Yes. Like I remember, there was all that talk during the campaign, like, we've got so many more pages of white papers than that dumb guy Donald Trump. It's like, if I ever hear anyone brag about the length of a white paper again, I'm going to lose it.
One thing that you mentioned earlier that people did call Obama aloof or professorial and all these things. The one thing that I always noticed about him, because I spent a year with him in Iowa watching him literally in backyards, and every Iowa cliche you can imagine I will spout. But the thing that was true about him and about the First Lady was that it was more recent that they were paying off student loans than that they had become famous politicians, and that reality allowed them to connect with people in a way that was authentic, and that is perishable, right? Because you spend long enough in Washington being told you're great and everything is brilliant and things get paid for by so-and-so at Bistro B or wherever you're going for lunch. You get lost.
Great steak frites there.
This is Pod Save America. Stick around. There's more great show coming your way.
Pod Save America is brought to you by Policy Genius Life Insurance. John, do you have life insurance?
No, I don't have dependents.
What about
I'm not
about
saying
Pundit?
This, you know what? You'll take Pundit.
I don't know that
I
Emily
don't
would
know
accept
that I agree to that.
Someone
Just
will
kidding.
take.
We love you, Pundit.
Someone will take Pundit.
Okay. If you don't have life insurance, what would
bleak.
happen financially if something happened to the primary earner? PolicyGenius.com is the best online life insurance marketplace. The most accurate quotes from the top A-rated life insurance companies. They've placed over $5 billion in life insurance for people just like you. It's a very user-friendly website. You can shop and compare all the top-rated life insurance companies to give you the best options. So go to PolicyGenius.com today to save over 70% off other prices for life insurance. When life insurance compete for your business, you save money. That's PolicyGenius.com. Zero jargon, zero sales pressure, zero hassle. It's life insurance made easy. Go to PolicyGenius.com today. And as always, Pod Save America is brought to you by SeatGeek. SeatGeek.
By the way, I feel like we're doing these kind of ads like this because we really are now out of jokes. And so now the joke has to be about this.
Anyway, everything about SeatGeek is designed to make life easier for sports and music fans. They do all the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring that you get the best possible deal. They do all the work, you save the time and money. SeatGeek wants to help you get the most bang for your buck. And best of all, Pod Save America listeners get a $20 rebate off their first SeatGeek purchase. To get your $20 rebate on tickets, you're going to go download the SeatGeek app. You're going to go to the settings tab and click add a promo code. You're going to enter the promo code.
The promo code is crooked. I'm just thinking that is a little complicated. So really pay attention.
Crooked. SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. Download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code crooked.
A lot of people are tweeting
today.
us saying that they're doing this.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So it's cool if you do it too.
So it's cool. Go do it. SeatGeek.
So what happens when Donald Trump doesn't, or do you think he will, bring manufacturing back? I mean, first of all, only 13% of the jobs lost in manufacturing between 2000 and 2010 were lost to trade. The rest were lost to automation. I read an interesting piece today that said Bill Gates wants to start taxing companies to slow, for their use of robotics to sort of slow the progression, this transformation we're witnessing from an industrial to a technological society. I mean, A, do you think he's going to bring manufacturing back? And B, what happens if he doesn't? Go.
Yeah, I mean, look, the most frustrating part of Donald Trump's, vision that he's selling people is that it's largely fiction, right? Is that most manufacturing jobs aren't coming back, right? That's something that, Bill Clinton was saying back in 1992 when he was running for president. He was honest with people about that. Barack Obama used to be honest with people about that. Now, there are companies that are, we saw this over the last 8 years. There's a trend towards insourcing where a lot of these companies are moving production back to America. So that's good. But it's still a tiny, like you said, it is a tiny fraction of the jobs that we've lost. The largest challenge we have as a country that we have to talk about is, and Obama was telling us this when he was on the podcast too, is automation, right? Like, what are we going to do?
But why didn't anybody talk about that during the campaign? It infuriated me.
Well, one, they should have. Two, it's a complicated issue that the campaign.
I don't think anybody knows the answer. That's why
that's
right.
That is huge.
I think no one knowing the answer where the next generation of jobs is going to come from is left an opening for someone like Trump and other
to lie about it.
Yeah, I mean, look,
right.
If the solutions of the center left and the center right are not going to answer the problems of regular people, it's going to open the door to monsters.
And it has.
I would just say we all should be rooting for Donald Trump's success because this is the biggest challenge we're going to face. It's going to get worse. It's going to get harder. I hope to God he can figure out a way to bring back jobs.
Are you really rooting for Donald Trump's success?
I am, on a policy level. But the reason I don't have a lot of
manufacturing.
The reason I don't have any, but the reason I don't have a lot of hope that he's really going to work on this and make progress is that he filed for re-election 5 hours after he was sworn in, and this weekend he held a campaign rally. And the guy loves the crowds and the big promises and the bluster and bravado, and we have not seen him spend a lot of time at the White House getting to work doing stuff. And yes, he can make press releases and repackage announcements from companies that had already pledged to create some sort of jobs here in the United States. But it's governing by press release. There's not a dedicated, thoughtful process in place to actually fix this stuff.
And even that is kind of a Band-Aid, although he is very good at making hay over small accomplishments like the carrier jobs, right?
Great at that. And that was actually an incredibly effective part of his pitch. So he's got this narrative he's writing about how he's renegotiating these little things and he's going to renegotiate the deals, right? That's not going to solve America's job problem. Then they go back and forth. Some days they're talking about some $1 trillion infrastructure project. The next day you hear from the Hill that that's not possible. That's actually something that could make a difference. Of course, these are the same Republicans who fought tooth and nail against a Democratic stimulus measure when the president came in and when we were in crisis.
Well, look, and the other policy is, tariffs and starting trade wars, which is certainly not going to solve the issue because that's just going to raise prices on poor and working class people. That's not an answer either. So his answers to the problem of manufacturing, which seems to be like threatening individual companies, promising an infrastructure bill that hasn't materialized yet, and throwing up tariffs are not, policy-wise, are not great solutions.
And just one more point, too, that right now the economy is growing and adding jobs. That won't necessarily be true over the next 4 years. He is sort of riding a long trend of job growth, which he can say, oh, look, a new factory here, a new factory there. But at a certain point, it's live by the polls, die by the polls.
Taking credit for the stock market is a dangerous game, buddy.
Right.
It goes up and it goes down.
Why we didn't do it.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you guys about President Obama's relationship with President Trump. Do they talk? I mean, you guys probably know this. I can't imagine President Obama being like, yo, Donald, let's talk, given some of the stuff that Trump has been saying in recent days about, he inherited a real mess, blah, 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 right?
I think President Obama is better at brushing that stuff off than his hack aides who are on the phone right now are, and I think he can sort of see through that and try to have a constructive relationship because they, when they're alone in the Oval Office, nobody's tweeting "Make America Great Again." It's a conversation about how hard the job is going to be, and I think he's tried to have a constructive conversation with him about the realities of how hard this is, the things he thinks he should protect and preserve, the political traps, the challenges of building a good team. So I think he's really tried to help him in a constructive way.
Clearly.
He hasn't really popped off in response to any of the provocations you mentioned. So that's
well, let me ask you, though,
positive.
at some point, does he become a voice of those who are opposing Donald Trump? And is that how he becomes an effective former president?
I mean, I think on big issues he may. I think that it's his belief, and it's been his belief long before Trump, that the most important thing he can do is sort of inspire the next generation of voices to go out and lead, right? Because he knows that he's not going to run for office again. He's not going to be president again. But we do need leaders who aren't afraid to stand up and speak out and take up the fight. And so,
Okay, that's a perfect segue to my next question.
Sure.
Exciting.
Who are this is going very seamlessly, isn't it, you guys?
You're very good at this. That's why.
So who are the future stars of the Democratic Party, and really for maybe a more moderate Republican Party as well, if that exists?
So there's Tommy, there's John, I'm here. So we'll start there. I think that's an important group. But beyond that, I'm actually not sure. I don't really follow politics.
Kamala Harris out in California's got maybe the best bench for the party, period.
Garcetti,
Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom.
Yeah.
and then Jason Kander,
Friend of the pod.
Pete Buttigieg.
Jason Kander, is he the one that did the great ad where he put together
Yes.
the automatic weapon blindfolded? Yeah. And he lost, but he's still a very strong and much followed progressive voice, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and he did so much better in that race than he had any right to do.
He's a card-carrying badass. We also, obviously Elizabeth Warren is like an emotional leader.
I want to be a card-carrying badass.
I think you have been
I think
for
you
a
are.
while.
I mean, you just have to apply. Anybody can get one. It's like actually just like it's a scam, really.
All right. Who else? Who else do you see as? And what about? Well, go ahead and tell me, and then I have a follow-up. Go ahead. Who else?
Who else do we say? I like Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, who's running for DNC
I
chair.
interviewed him. What about Michael Bennett?
Love Michael Bennett. I remember seeing him at a fundraiser once when I was traveling with Obama, and I wasn't paying attention because it was a long day, and I just heard this speech. I'm like, who's delivering that speech in there? And it was Michael Bennett.
The weird thing is, you think of these politicians as like people who are adults and you're senior, and then all of a sudden there's this generation of leaders like Jason Kander or like Seth Moulton, who's a member of Congress out of
I've heard
Massachusetts.
his name a lot.
Seth Moulton's great.
Yeah, who are 35, the next generation of leaders that are really, really impressive.
What about Cory Booker and Andrew Cuomo? Do you see them running in 2020?
I don't know about Booker. I could see.
Yeah.
I don't know if Cuomo. I feel like he's got a lot of baggage.
Who doesn't?
People
Who
are saying.
doesn't?
Katie, we don't like to criticize people until after they've been on the podcast. So you're kind of getting us in trouble.
All right, what
basically
about
sounded
somebody
like an
outside?
uninformed voter
What
there.
about someone outside the political realm? We've seen with Donald Trump, a businessman can get elected. What about someone like Howard Schultz? And I know people sort of have jokingly suggested somebody like Tom Hanks. I mean, do you see this opening the door to a new breed of, the non-politician running for president?
I would say that we should probably not try to learn too many lessons like that from Donald Trump, who is, I think, a unique figure. But I think the more the merrier. I mean, if there are people who are smart and charismatic and have good ideas and are expert. I mean, I don't know about famous actors.
What about Mark Cuban?
I thought you were going to say Zuckerberg.
Oh, well, what about either of them? Actually, let's discuss both of them. Let's start with Mark Cuban. He appeared at that All-Star Celebrity Game in New Orleans on Saturday in a jersey emblazoned with number 46. I think Donald Trump then tweeted that he wasn't smart enough, or has in recent days. Mark Cuban isn't smart enough to be president. I mean, honestly, you guys cannot make this shit up, can you?
It's ridiculous.
Am I allowed to say that on a podcast?
Oh, yeah, you can say whatever
We have
you
an
want.
explicit rating on our
we
podcast.
have that E.
Okay,
We have that
good.
E. But I mean, I like Cuban. Just clearly, Cuban gets under Trump's skin. So as long as Cuban's out there doing that, I think that's great.
Zuckerberg,
And what about Zuckerberg?
I mean, I just don't I think what we've all been hitting on in this conversation is that authenticity has become coin of the realm, and I don't know that Zuckerberg seems to be approaching this as cautiously as humanly possible.
It's like Mark Zuckerberg seems like he's spent 30 years in Washington when he speaks.
The way forward is not 6,000 word letters. It's talking to people.
Do you think he's charismatic enough? I mean, do you think he's charismatic enough? Because I think the thing is with Trump, like him or not, for whatever reason, his bravado and his bluster and his kind of unconventional way of speaking.
Trump is charismatic and he is charming and he is funny, and we ignore that at our peril. I've always felt that he has a great sense of humor when he brings up if you watch his rallies. Look, it's hard to put it aside because he's racist and despicable and he's lying all the time. But if that's not how you
Other
approach
than
it,
that,
other than that, how was the play? But but if you could put that aside, or if you didn't approach it with that sense of who he is, he's great. He's an entertaining guy. That rally, he brings up a guy, everybody's laughing. He's like, we know our people. Everybody, he's an entertainer. He's a showman, and it works.
It seems like he's running the White House like an episode of The Apprentice, too, right? I mean,
Yes.
kind of encouraging people to compete and to, I don't know, that's sort of what I've heard from people who are covering this White House. Didn't he say it was a well-oiled machine, or what did he say?
Fine-tuned machine.
Fine-tuned
That's what it looks
machine.
like.
And but it seems like, I mean, what do you guys hear about what's going on at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
Exactly that. I mean, I think that's his Achilles heel is that competence and the ability to run the biggest organization in the world is what the job is. And he has shown no capacity to do that. He's put in place a team that's over its head at best, if not constantly knifing each other. And I think that there will be repercussions. We haven't seen them yet because nothing really bad has happened. But it will, because
The world's a dangerous place.
world's a
Things
dangerous
happen.
place. Yeah.
I heard he doesn't really have a schedule. He sort of wanders around a lot.
Yeah.
Reporters tell us that, in years, many reporters who I've spoken to never ran into Barack Obama in the hallway, and they'll just see Trump wandering down to lower press, or they'll walk into the press secretary's office and he'll just be sitting there with the chief of staff watching cable TV, and it's not a good use of time.
Well, before we go, because I know you guys have given me more time than you schedule, which I really appreciate.
This is better than me.
I know you. I know
You've
you
given
always
us more
busy.
time. You've given us the time.
But let's talk about it with Crooked Media. Are you trying to convert people to the cause, or are you just preaching to the choir?
We want to do a lot of converting here. We want to do a lot of brainwashing. No, we do. We think, like I said, I would love this company to expand its audience, right, and to reach more people who might, especially people who might not have been as engaged in politics as they want to be now, right? Because there's like you said, you can't escape Trump, right? We are at a moment in our history now where more people are paying attention to politics than they have been in quite some time. And for that new audience that's tuning in, that's who we want to reach. And I think mostly they're younger too.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's arming people with information and resources, and I think that's hopefully a role we can play. I think that there's taking somebody from being less engaged to more engaged. And then I think there is also room for people who may not have heard a kind of, I don't know, I mean, look, it sounds like branding, but like kind of a no bullshit conversation that maybe has a liberal perspective, but might be accessible to somebody who isn't sure what their politics are, maybe thinks they're a Republican, or maybe has been conservative in the past, but hey, we're pretty okay guys. I'm hilarious. That helps.
Do you think this is going to translate to a higher voter turnout? Because I find that one of the most depressing aspects is the fact that so many people didn't vote, or voted for, threw their vote away by voting for Gary Johnson. Although I saw Bill Weld the other night, and he said 75% of their voters were actually Trump voters. I'm not sure if that's true.
Okay, Bill.
I know.
Sure.
So anyway, but do you think that more people will get out and vote? Because of all the people protesting, I'd like to walk around and ask all of them if they voted.
I think it's entirely incumbent upon the Democrats to put forward a candidate that inspires people and gets them out there. Because I think we did learn that demonizing someone, even when they deserve it, is not an incentive to get people out. And we need to inspire them and get them to the polls. And Barack Obama did that incredibly well, and we need to find that next leader that can help do that.
Yeah, and by the way, even before 2020, I think the single biggest challenge that Democrats have is taking this energy, this enthusiasm for protest, this fear and this anger and this anxiety, and translating it into votes in 2018 to win the House, so that we can begin the process of actually having a government that holds these people accountable.
Do you think there's any appetite for Hillary Clinton to run again? We've already started hearing rumblings about that she's positioning herself to go for it in 2020. Thoughts?
Literally none.
I would be shocked if shocked. I would be more shocked than Trump
I don't
winning.
think she would want to do that.
I mean,
She would
Can I-
punch the staffer in
yeah,
the face who recommended that she do that.
think that's. I don't. First of all, I can't believe that's real. I think that probably if this group of people were being honest, we'd say that we would be very much opposed to that because we need new people. We need a new voice, somebody that can challenge Trump from the outside.
So as fascinating as you three are, don't you want to ask me some questions about my podcast and why we're doing this and yada, yada, yada?
Katie, tell us about your podcast and why you're doing it.
Well, thanks for asking, John. I thought it would be really interesting to have these kinds of conversations. First of all, I'm able to express myself during a podcast in a way that I can't in any other venue.
We love
that. I think people are hungering for deeper, more kind of meaningful and spontaneous conversations. And I think that is what a podcast affords. I do this with my friend and, someone I admire a lot, Brian Goldsmith, who worked with me at CBS. We sat for 5 days in the den of my apartment coming up with questions to ask Sarah Palin in that 2008 interview. And
It's incredible.
Brian is one of these really serious. Well, he's like you guys. You guys should have him as a guest because he's sort of a carbon copy of the three of you. And so it's fun for me to talk with him. And oftentimes he reads everything, so he's able to break. I read a lot too, but he's able to break things down. And so we just have a lot of fun. We've interviewed so many cool people, from Samantha Bee. We've interviewed Alec Baldwin. We've just interviewed Bill Browder, who wrote Red Notice about Putin. So it's an opportunity. I'm sort of endlessly curious about all kinds of things. So I think it's a really fun outlet, and people seem to respond to it. I was buying bananas at this little neighborhood market the other day, and this woman came up to me. She said, "I can't believe it." And she had her phone. She said, "Look what I'm listening to." And I was like, "Do-do-do-do-do-do-do." That's really weird. So it's fun.
No, we enjoy the form of podcasting is it's a medium that lets you do a lot that others don't.
Yeah, and it's intimate, and I feel like I listen to podcasts, and it feels like you're kind of sitting at the table with the people that are talking. So it's kind of a different relationship.
I feel like we're having a slumber party.
That's right.
I am in sweatpants.
But that doesn't have to do with the party. So everyone that's listening from Pod Save America should go subscribe to Katie Couric's podcast, guys.
That's right.
Listen to
Thank
Katie
you
and Brian.
guys for the plug. And this was really, really fun. I love talking to you all. And I think, I don't know if you've found this to be so, but you can't really go anywhere where we're not talking about the state of the country and what's going on in Washington and President Trump. And I find it still endlessly fascinating. And why do you think that's the case? And I don't think it's just people who love politics either. Do you?
I think it's a mixture of fear and fascination.
Yeah, I mean, look, the fact that this happened this way, I think, is incredibly. I think everybody's surprised and everybody's still trying to figure it out. And I think certainly, I happen to think we're in the middle of a national crisis. And I think that crisis is, if there's one good thing coming out of it, is that people are talking to each other and trying to figure it out and thinking about politics in new ways. And it's kind of, you even see this with journalists. You see people kind of getting back to first principles, like, what do I do? Why do I care about it? What is important to me? I mean, that's part of the reason we did this company, because the election of Donald Trump, I think, forced us to confront what we cared about and if we cared about it enough.
Do you think there's a risk that Democrats are just repeating Hillary's mistakes by attacking Donald Trump and not coming up with a clear and cohesive message for their own mission?
I think that could be a risk. I don't know if it's happening yet, but I think if we do not have a coherent vision to sell at voters in 2018 and 2020, then we very well could repeat those mistakes. So I think it's important that we do that. And
something we've talked about a lot here is that, I think that especially, and this is the point that you were making about kind of talking just to ourselves, it can't just be about how bad Trump is, and it can't just be about how he insults our values, our norms, the way we think politics should sound, vulgarity and all the rest. It has to be about how Trump's policies will hurt you. Right, how it will actually affect your day-to-day life. And we need to make sure we're constantly talking not just about how we have the right values, how we care about freedom of the press, how we care about these institutions and norms, but why they matter and why they'll make your life better if you follow the policies you care about.
I alluded to this question earlier, and I don't think you all really answered it. How long will it be? I think we veered off into a whole conversation about manufacturing, but how long will it take before people who think that Donald Trump voted for him because they believed he would make their lives demonstratively better. How long will it take before they say, hey, you have to pay the piper, we voted for you and our lives aren't better? Or do you think that he'll take enough incremental steps and their lives will be sufficiently improved?
I think the odds are that he will hurt them because they will not necessarily realize that the Affordable Care Act was benefiting them, or that certain tax policies will be changed that will overly benefit the wealthy. So I can't put a ballpark time frame on this because some of it is going to have to do with the implementation of policy and the way people get their news about it. But I think that what he's going to do is going to cost him electorally. I genuinely do think
I will
that.
say that elections help focus the mind. So I think when we get to 2018, if there has not been any policy that helps working people out of this White House, I think people will respond accordingly at the polls.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a being president isn't a campaign. You actually have to do things. You have to do the things you say. You can't just complain. You can't just whine. You can't just pick a target. People will actually see what happens in their world.
And I know you aren't betting men, but do you think he's going to make it all 4 years? And maybe you are. I don't know. I don't know you guys well enough.
We are out of the prediction business. All right, because
we suck at it.
Because I still think Hillary's going to win.
Well, that's a nice way to end this conversation. Really fun talking to you guys.
you
Can
too,
we
Katie.
do this?
Thank you so
Can
much.
we do this again in 6 months and
Yeah,
talk
we'll
about
check in.
sort of
We'll
what
check in and see if the
has
country's
happened
still
to
here.
journalism, what's happened to policy, and what's happened to the Democrats and the Republicans?
For sure. We'll call you from the gulag.
Yeah, right. If one of us can use our phone call of the day.
All right. This was really fun. Thanks so much, you guys.
Take care, Katie.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That is our show for today. Thank you to Katie Couric for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
I feel like we got a new side of Katie.
Yeah, if you were to tell me in high school that I was going to hang out with Katie Couric for 45 minutes, I never would have believed you.
I mean, she was in a
pretty-
studio
that
in
was
New York,
pretty awesome.
but it was kind of like
You
hanging.
ruined the illusion, asshole.
Friend
No
of the,
one thinks she's here.
friend of the pod,
Friend of
Katie
the pod.
Couric, and card-carrying badass.
Card carrying badass.
I think we just got a name of the episode, guys.
So that was awful. That little clicking off. Leave all this in. I want this in. He fucking
Really
clicked at us
punchy.
like a horse.
Fine-tuned machine.
I want it all. I want to hear that song, and I want this to be happening.
That's so funny.
I'm turning off my mic.